Hello, everyone. My name's Layla, and I work at an organization called Us Together with Hannah. And what I do at Us Together is I work, well, firstly, Us Together is, okay, just a little bit about us in case you can go to the next slide. A little bit about us in case you've never heard of who we are. We are a comprehensive immigration services nonprofit organization. We're on 161 and 71 over in that area. And what we do is we serve the immigrant community in Central Ohio. We also have an office in Cleveland and Toledo, but we've been around since 2003. Our founders, Nadia, Tatiana, they are former refugees themselves from the former Soviet Union. They came in the late 80s and they saw a growing need of, resettlement, serving immigrant populations in Central Ohio, and that's how we were founded. A little bit about me though, and my role at Us Together. I've been there for 5 years. I've done a whole lot of different roles. That's nonprofit life. Currently I'm working in more of a legal capacity, helping people applying for various documents, green cards, asylum, stuff like that. Hannah, if you want, well, does everyone know your background?
I think, yeah, someone do. So yeah, I've been with the agency also for 7 years, and I started the Victim Services Department. We receive grants from Department of Health and Human Services to work with survivors of torture, with victims of crime, human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And there's also like a growing need, especially with some of the populations in Columbus, talking about female genital mutilation and cutting is one of the other, work that we do at the agency. And, it's just like part of one of the department that we try to like grow on a regular need, because as Layla is going to express, the refugee resettlement project or a period is very short, 90-day period. After that, usually families do not have any assistance, so the agency always continues to apply for grants to continue working with especially limited English proficient victims of crime that live in Columbus, Ohio.
So anytime I give presentations like this, I like to do a little crowd participation. So at Us Together, we work with lots of different folks with different immigration statuses, but on the board here, these are some of the different categories of immigrants that we're working with. And I would just like to hear from you all. Are these familiar terms to you? Do you know how one can distinguish one status from another? Does anyone have any thoughts, insights? What distinguishes an immigrant from a refugee or an asylum seeker, things like that?
I think the refugee, like they apply for refugee, they have a situation in the country where they have to move out, but they apply for that, and they do a lot of background and check on them, and but the immigrant just like with visa, they come over here for the education or for whatever, to work or anything, and it doesn't have to be unsafe for them.
Sure, yeah. Good. I'll get into more details of it. Any other ones? Has anyone heard of a parolee before? Okay, this one's been in the news a lot the past year, so I'll talk more about that. And of course, US citizens, So I always like to start off just defining immigrant. So immigrant is just a term used to describe anyone that wants to reside and they seek residence in the United States or of course other countries. If they are coming with some type of visa in mind already, like whether it's a work visa, we call them lawful permanent residents because they are allowed to reside here permanently. But there's a few different ways that one can go about entering and residing permanently in the United States. And those are those 4 bullet points at the bottom. So most common probably is their relationship to a US citizen or a permanent resident. So permanent resident, green card holder, they're synonymous. So it's, this is what people usually call like family reunification. So if there's someone, if you have a brother, sister, spouse, parent, or child that's a US citizen, you could follow to be reunited with them. Even if you have permanent residency, if you have a parent, spouse, or a child that has a green card, you can follow to join them as well. But that's it. That's the only relation there is. There's no cousins, no uncles. It's strictly like immediate family who is able to come via this means. The second bullet point, an offer of employment. So a lot of like large corporations or companies that have that ability to like sponsor individuals for green cards, they're able to come to the United States via that means. Investment of a sum of money in a US business, kind of similar to the offer of employment. This isn't like, oh, I have ambitions to open up a little corner shop. It's like a large enterprise where you can invest usually, I forget what the exact amount is, but it's over $1 million of, you know, capital that you need to put down first before you're able to pursue that way. And then there's something called the Diversity Visa Lottery. Has anyone heard of this program before? Yeah, so each year, the US government, they'll open up, I think it's 55,000 slots. And is that around 55,000? Yeah. And it's exactly what it sounds. It's a lottery system. So you know, put your name in and then they just choose at random. They weigh it according to regions of the world, and it's, so you're not necessarily at a, it's not totally diverse because they give a certain amount per regions, but that's something that exists also for coming to the United States. And what's important to recognize for immigrants are these are people that are choosing and making that like conscious decision to travel to and reside in the United States. They have either the means or they're able to, you know, pick up and make that decision to come live in the United States. So that's immigrant. Next populations that we'll work with are asylum seekers or asylees. So these are folks that are, they're physically present in the United States, but prior to coming here, they did not have any type of status. So usually when they arrive at a port of entry, so whether that's at an airport or like a land border, they're seeking that admission into the United States. What distinguishes asylum seekers from other, you know, broad immigrant categories is the reason why they are seeking entry into the United States is because they're afraid to return to their country of origin because of past persecution. So what that means is they are afraid because based on their race, religion, national origin, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, they were targeted, they were harmed, they were threatened, they were, you know, in some cases tortured. And they know that if they were to go back to their country, that would persist, that would continue. So that's the asylum in a nutshell. But that's very important to know is they have this well-founded fear of if they return to their country, there's going to be continued persecution for them.
And usually they haven't started their like process, right? They have to start the process.
Yeah,
while
so
present here.
yeah, for asylum seekers, they, like I said, they start the process of applying through this paperwork in the United States. And they have to start this process within 1 year of their entry into the United States. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, people are applying within 1 year of their entry. So, okay. Refugees, this is the UN's definition of a refugee. So it's more or less the same as asylum seekers. It's just the means of them getting to the United States are vastly different. So same as asylum seekers, they were persecuted based on race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. And they are seeking refuge, they're seeking safety in another country. So, continue. Okay, so a lot of times we hear the word refugee thrown about and it's used, it's not incorrect, but in the work that Hannah and I do, it's very incorrect. A lot of times people that are talking about asylum seekers, they'll use the word refugee, but it's very different because, you know, a refugee is a separate immigration status than asylum seeker or asylee. And the things that, like the benefits that comes along with both of those immigration statuses, completely different. So in our work, and if you're doing work in the community with these populations, it's very important to be able to discern those definitions. So as it says there, the definitions are the same. So fleeing because they're afraid to return to their home country, but the procedures are vastly different. Like I said, with asylum seekers, they're on their own, they're seeking admission at, you know, port of entry. Whereas refugees, like what Farida mentioned, it's a very formalized process and it starts years and years ahead of their arrival into the United States. So a lot of our families that we work with before coming to the United States, they were, you know, residing in, you know, either refugee camps in a different country, or even if they were outside of their country of origin, they were living maybe in like urban environments. They were there for years and years before they were able to get the clearance to come to the United States. So with refugees, and I'll go into more of that process in the coming slides, but with refugees, you know, because they're fully vetted and, you know, approved to arrive prior to their arrival, as soon as they arrive, they have work authorization cards, so they're able to work. They have social security cards, and they're able to, and they're working in government programs or funded by Department of State, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security. All these, you know, federal agencies are working in conjunction at the local level to resettle refugees, whereas that isn't necessarily the process for asylum seekers. Oh, we got a little. 85% of the world's refugees are being hosted by developing countries. Okay, so fun fact, not so fun fact. You can continue. Okay, so the path of a refugee, how does someone get from their country of origin to Columbus, Ohio? So what's important to know with refugees is they've had to cross at least one international border before they got to the United States. So they flee persecution of their country of origin, and then it's in usually a neighboring country, just because people usually go by, you know, by land. Not necessarily in all cases though. They get refugee status in what we call host countries. So for example, you know, think of a world map. We have always been working with a lot of people from Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. They fled to neighboring Rwanda or neighboring Uganda to seek safety. And it's in Rwanda or Uganda that they are able to they start that process. It starts at the international level with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, and it's that governing agency that's kind of the authority on refugee resettlement, and they are the ones that are not giving out. They're the ones that are clearing folks to be, you know, designated as refugees that could potentially be eligible for resettlement years down the line. Yes.
So can those people who move from their country to another country, the refugee, get asylum in that country? So why do they go there and then ask to be a refugee in the third place?
Yeah, so at that point, folks, like for example, just continuing, if you're from Congo and you go to Rwanda, at that point they would be, you know, probably they are asylum seekers. I mean, it's whatever the host country's processes are for keeping non-nationals like in their borders. It's probably different for each country, but I mean, like that previous slide said, 85% of refugees are being hosted in developing countries or undeveloped countries. So they may be safe from the immediate dangers in their home country, but the situations are usually not that much better anyway. So if there's an opportunity to go to countries that resettle refugees, and I think there's like 36 of them, they're your Western liberal democracies. If they have that opportunity, they'll, take it. But I think that's a question I have in the next slide, so I won't spoil it too much.
And the other thing is, I mean, a lot of these, just like hosting countries usually don't have attractive citizenship for these populations. You're there, you can live, for years, you're not able to even work there. You're just like waiting, basically, 12, 13 years waiting in a refugee camp. You cannot own a property, you cannot start your own business. So this is why it's usually like not a long-term solution for most of them, because there's no track to citizenship at all. Like the situation in Lebanon, for example, hosting 1.5 million Syrian refugees. They've been living there for like 15 years now almost, and they will never gain Lebanese citizenship or be able to work or, be able to support their families. So
yeah, you can keep this up. So that's kind of what Hannah was saying. So with the United Nations, they have what they call them the durable solutions, and those are those 3 bullet points. And this is basically the different paths that an individual who gets designated with refugee status will pursue in their time with that status. So voluntary repatriation, that means they go back eventually to their home country, their country of origin. So sometimes tensions and country conditions improve over time, and it's safe for people to return and they go back. That's an option. Local integration is there's opportunities for someone to stay in their host country, so they're able to stay and work. It's different in each place, obviously, because that depends on whatever country's own internal policies on, hosting immigrants. So, and then the third option by the UN that is considered for folks is resettlement into a third country. So that would be like the US or Germany or Canada. Yes. This has the questions. Okay, so see what you guys think. So about how many people do you think are displaced in the world? So this could mean people that have crossed an international border, or they could be internally displaced in their own country. What do you guys think?
100 million.
Okay, that's a good guess. That's a very good guess. Okay, so and actually this is actually, I think, old. This does not reflect numbers from
Afghanistan or Ukraine.
Afghanistan and Ukraine, so it would be around probably 100 million then. Yep, so good. Okay, how many have been registered with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees? So these are like, I mean, that 82 million, they're all like refugees, but who are like designated official refugees? How many do you think?
Probably half.
Half? A quarter, 10%? Okay, let's see. Okay, so it would be, if we updated the first one, it would be like a quarter. So yeah, not many. Okay, next question. Newly displaced in 2020. A lot happened between environmental stuff and war and global pandemics. Okay, 11 million. Okay. What percentage of forcibly displaced peoples are under 18, so minors? 42%. So a lot of these countries that are hosting refugees or are places where people are being displaced, their like demographics are very bottom heavy. Lots of people under the age of like 30. It's, you know, very, no, this way. Like the US and like Europe, all the old people are at like the top and it goes down as you think, but the global south, lots of young folks and population. Yeah.
So why just only 50% of them if they register just applications? So why the United Nations does not do the same register?
I think it's like capacity
It
things
is, yes, yes.
and there'll be a slide coming up that shows how large the scale of some of these camps are. It's just a management thing, I
Exactly.
believe, yeah.
And I mean, it has to do also with like some political situations in the countries. I know like all Syrian refugees, for example, that reside in Lebanon, they're not allowed to register with UNHCR. You have to be either in Syria or Jordan or Turkey to be able to be registered as a refugee. I know it's like lots of, you know, political and the situations in the countries. UNHCR does not like offer these services in certain countries, so especially for resettlement.
Yeah, and I can say, because I thought it was a question, but it's less than 1% of these 25 million are resettled into a third country, so the US or Canada or Germany or wherever. So it's a very small number are actually being resettled. A lot of them are staying in those host countries or going back to their country of origins. Oh, and that's the breakdown. So 48 million. So like about half are displaced within their own country. So if in that situation, there's definitely no prospect of being resettled elsewhere because you're still within in your own country of origin. So, okay, and those are from the UN. Okay, so that other immigration status that I mentioned on that one slide are called parolees, and it's the immigration as a whole, status as a whole is called humanitarian parole. These are the populations that I've been working with for the past year, especially with Afghans. So humanitarian parole, it's a temporary status. It's not intended to give you any type of pathway to a green card or citizenship. You're here because there was some type of event in your country that made it unsafe for you to reside there, and you can temporarily get that safety by coming to the United States. So over the past year, we've had 2 groups of people that have been humanitarian paroled into the US. So those are folks from Afghanistan and most recently Ukraine. So humanitarian parole, it's a 2-year temporary status where people can come to the United States. They're able to work in this time. But the assumption is that whatever is happening in your country is temporary, and after 2 years, you would be able to go back to your country of origin. It can be extended. I know one example, Haiti has had this designation for, 2010, I think. That was when they had a big earthquake. And they just every 2 years, USCIS Citizenship and Immigration Services or Homeland Security, they're like, you guys can't go back yet. It's not safe for you to go. So it can be renewed, but it's in 2-year increments.
And who decides they would like to go back?
It's Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security. Yeah, so it's temporary, but yeah. So that's humanitarian parole, and I think there's probably some other. So if we wanted to, oh, that's weird. I can see the thing on there, but not there. Okay, well, so in case you're, interested, you're working or you interact or meet with any Afghans that recently came to the US, this is kind of the pathway that they have if they did want to eventually like stay and reside here long term. There are some options for them to be able to do that. And this is literally my work in a graphic right now. So all of our Afghans that came anywhere in the United States. They were evacuated by the US military. A lot of them were working alongside the US troops in Afghanistan, whether they were in more combat roles or working at embassies or at schools that were sponsored by like USAID. But they were able to come to the United States through those means. And upon arrival, they had that parolee status that I just explained. What's interesting with Afghans is because of the country conditions and because of other existing immigration visas that are already in place in the United States, a lot of our Afghans, they actually do have some type of pathway to get like a green card, reside here permanently, and eventually down the line gets US citizenship. So those options, and if anyone's interested and would like to hear more, I can tell you all about it. But just for the sake of this, they can apply for something called a special immigrant visa. Those are for folks that worked with the US military, or they can apply for asylum. So as I mentioned in the beginning, they came to the US within that 1 year of arrival, they're applying for asylum because obviously it's unsafe for them to return because the Taliban is in power of the country, control of the country. So a lot of them have very well-founded fears of going back based on previous persecutions they received or the prospect of future issues that may come if they go back based on, their involvement with the US or their jobs that they had, their ethnic backgrounds. So a lot of our Afghans have that possibility of applying for asylum. And then of course, what always exists if they have family members already residing in the US, immediate family members like a spouse or a parent or a child, they could potentially get a green card that way. If you have a green card for 5 years, you can then apply to become a naturalized US citizen, which is that's kind of the pathway that Afghans have.
A lot of these families have been, choosing to reside in Dublin, Hilliard, so it's like been, a lot of them asked about Upper Arlington, lots of interest in the schools, very highly educated community. Most of them are, physicians and engineers, and so education is always on their mind for their families. So
especially, these families, because they know if they go back, that's not an option, at least for families that have girls, that's not an option anymore. So but what is it important to know that if they do not get their asylum approved or they don't get their special immigrant visa approved, they would have to find another means to stay in the United States, or they have to just like keep on renewing their parole. They'd have to be re-paroled in. So
it's a process.
It's a process. Ukrainians, what's interesting with Ukrainians is they have the same immigration status. They're paroled in because they were not evacuated by US military. If they came to the United States, they had to have a US sponsor. So a family, does it have to be a family member, or can anyone sponsor?
Anybody.
Okay, as long as they can prove
Could
that
be
they
a
are
church,
financially
Even
able
like
to.
community groups have been
Yeah.
sponsoring Ukrainians and places of worship, lots of churches and synagogues.
Yeah, so as long as they're able to prove that they can financially support, the family or the individual, they're able to sponsor them to come to the United States. But with the Ukrainians, this is one of the bad things about asylum. It all goes back to those 5 things. You had to be persecuted based on your race, religion, national origin, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Unfortunately, war is not a reason to seek asylum, at least in the US. So unfortunately, asylum is not an option for our Ukrainian families that come. They can continue to get re-paroled, or they can do something called temporary protected status, which is pretty much the same thing. It allows them to continue getting work authorization, but once again, that's temporary. They would have to keep on renewing that as long as the Department of Homeland Security designates Ukraine as a country that is, unsafe to like return to. And then of course, if you have family members, you can get residency that way. Okay, that was a lot of information. Do you have questions? Or just general? Yeah, we always do these presentations and we spend a lot of time on those definitions because I think it's, important to be able to recognize those different things, and it gets you to understand the process a little bit more. It's not as easy as just hopping on a plane and entering. It's, a long process, lots of laws.
I have a couple of questions. Who all have you presented this to? You talk about presenting it to like our group. Who all do you present it to?
Depending on the audience, we do a lot, depending also, with the outreach event that we're trying, if we do it at a hospital, for example, for physicians, talking about, the populations that we work with, nurses. We've done it a lot for schools, especially Columbus City schools, very diverse populations. Hilliard and Dublin, for sure, have, especially the school system. We work a lot with law enforcement, especially with, victim of crime programming. There's lots of interest in developed translated material all the time that we share. So
Did the state just, within the last 2 years, state of Ohio just form as organization that does this similar to what you do?
So our agents, so each resettlement agency in the United States, they have what is called, resettlement state refugee coordinator, and they are our main communication with the state agencies, whether it's the Department of Jobs and Family Services, whether it's the Social Security office, just like different agencies where most of our clients like go to for employment or getting public benefits or any of that. So
Well, I remember about 2 years ago, there was a new organization formed by the state of Ohio for helping out of country or refugees, however you want to word it.
Mhm.
Then
The New American something. That's
it's-
another resettlement.
Yep. this is another.
Have you ever met with the state boards and commissions? There's 30 state boards and commissions in the state of Ohio.
Yes, our
And they
councils,
yes, have people come to them and they try to get credentials evaluated. Do you use a credential evaluation service, a national one?
I think so.
And
Yes,
then,
I think.
But I know with reciprocity, it's one of the big issues that I would suggest that if you haven't met with the state of Ohio boards and commissions, they meet once a month. Every executive director sits in a room like this and they discuss all the issues, and it would be wonderful for them because a lot of them have the power to either issue a license or refuse a license to someone coming in from out of country. And it gets to be a real hard process and shouldn't be that way. And I think that you could help out a lot by just meeting those people, calling the state of Ohio governor's office and asking to sit in on one of those meetings. And they would love to have this information as directors so that they can better help people get reciprocity.
Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, I know, our agency, Nadia is on, the board with Columbus City for, making Columbus a welcoming city for refugees and immigrants. There are lots of initiatives that, they've taken, making sure that interpretation, translation, housing is always a topic. Unfortunately, housing our clients is always an issue. Definitely employment, transportation, is always like something that is, topics that are all discussed all the time on with the city level.
Well, by reaching those boards and commissions, you would reach the whole state of Ohio.
Mhm.
I mean, so all the
Yeah.
licensees in the state.
Do you guys
I'm
have
still,
numbers, like how, like, so of all qualifications, what you just listed out, what they curriculums, how many do you guys process, or how many do the state of Ohio? curious to know like whether the number that are moving to Dublin is like how's the population growing? Like,
Yes.
what is that? How can that affect us?
Absolutely. I mean, several agencies sits like on a quarterly, it's called the quarterly consultation call with the state of Ohio and the different resettlement agencies in Columbus. There's Us Together, there's Chris, there's Ethiopian Tawahidi Social Services that do resettlement work in Columbus. And they sit on a quarterly consultation meeting and they share numbers on, the populations that are arriving, how many, from different countries, where they are resettling in Columbus, the role of Columbus Public Health to help them, the school education system, if they have enough ESL classes to work with them, different resources. So it's like continuously shared. Definitely, there's a huge interest on where they end up resettling because, usually it's a matter of capacity within that, city.
It's a wonderful job that you people do that are helping with this, because it would be very frustrating to come to this country and have a skill that you had in your other country and you couldn't perform that skill because of the roadblocks and that. So I thank you
See
for what
that
you
a
do. Definitely thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we're almost running out of time, but we do have an enterprise as part of Us Together with the interpreting services. We have, maybe close to like 100 languages, interpreters in all three, offices, Cleveland, Toledo, and Ohio. So I've worked with Columbus City. I mean, the city schools have reached to us for interpretation services all the time for a couple of the families and been able to provide those as well.
Our person today get to you, like the referral process, or did it show up at your door?
Very good question.
Good transition. Before that though, these are countries that we are, that we resettle, not that we personally resettle, but just in general where refugees are coming from around the world. So Syria, Afghanistan, Venezuela, South Sudan, Myanmar. We resettle. In the past year, we've resettled people from all these countries.
Yeah, we're the largest, community that hosts Bhutanese Nepali outside Bhutan. Columbus, Ohio is home to the largest Nepali Bhutanese community, and we are second largest to Somali. I mean, second largest to Minnesota and Somali populations. So
And this is another question, like, who decides where to bring, because like, for Minnesota, it is the largest settlement for Somalis, they come from environment that's totally opposite to
Right.
what Minnesota is.
Right.
So-
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. These are good questions. Yeah, in
that's
a,
that one. Just
yeah.
Images of refugee camps. This is
Yeah.
in Uganda.
Mhm.
So just like seeing the populations, most of them live an average of 12 to 15 years in a refugee camp before, they go to school there, they work there, they see doctors there. So
Lots of overcrowding.
lots of overcrowding, hygiene issues.
Did I get rid of those slides? Or maybe they're further down.
I think they are just
Okay.
in swimming within the camp, they sleep within the camps, hospitals, OBGYN is a huge need. So some organizations,
Yeah, so
go ahead.
like I mentioned in the beginning, this is a process that starts all the way at the international level with the United Nations, but there's so many different stops along the way and different agencies that are involved in this process before you get down to the local level. Because we're not corresponding directly with the UN, we're doing with our state, our national affiliate, who then talks to like the federal agencies, who they and then are talking to worldwide, International Office of Migration, things like that.
So that goes to your question. So this is, somebody goes into the database And depending on if they have US ties or relatives in the United States, they would say, yes, can you please take me to Columbus, Ohio? I have family there. And just help me with the resettlement process. Some of them come in with no, what we call US ties. They're free, cases. And they just have to come in and, usually figure things, in addition to our support. Definitely, like, it's harder if you don't have a US tie or relative in the United States, but it's channeled from HIAS, which is Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. This is our, what we call there are 7 voluntary agencies in the United States that do resettlement work. So there's Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, there is Church World Services, there is
There's a,
Catholic Charities, they do that, a lot of work in Cleveland as well. So you have to be associated with one of these 7 voluntary agencies to be able to do a resettlement. You just can't open a resettlement agency, out of the blue. It has
yeah,
to be
and that's
affiliation.
here, I always like using this visual. So it starts at the top with the UN. And then once the UN is giving that refugee status to, a person or like a family, and they are considered for resettlement into like the United States, for example, that's when the next level of this pyramid comes in. And those are, it's called foreign ministries, but these are like the US based agencies. So this is Homeland Security, Department of State. They're all listed there. And what they're doing at this time is each of these agencies are doing their own background checks, biometrics, interviews of these individuals. And if they have to get cleared by all 7 of those agencies. And if there's something that comes up in USCIS's that doesn't come up in Department of States, that's a red flag. And that will probably, they'll throw away their application. So it's a very intense,
Vetting process.
long vetting process. That's what, and this is all done abroad. The person is not yet in the United States during these. But once they get that, yeah, so that's like further down the line. Once they get like their biometrics and security checks and they're clear, they get like an orientation, and that's when they travel to the United States. And that's when the US, that's when like Us Together or Chris gets involved. But just to add more on, if you don't have a US tie, you don't have a friend or a family here that can, you can go to, the way they, choose certain locations to resettle folks is if there's already an existing diaspora of a population in a certain city, they'll send you, there because you can get that support of a community that's familiar. That's how, Columbus became the largest Nepali, Bhutanese, spot in the United States. That's how St. Paul, like the Twin Cities, became the big Somali, destination. If it's not, if doesn't meet any of like that, more affordable places, that's why the Midwest is Columbus, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, these are places where there's a lot of refugees being resettled because at least it used to be more affordable than, a place like New York or Southern California. Or all
Are we still
California.
good on time? We can
We can,
take some questions. Yeah.
okay, but I mean, that's pretty much like the process. And then how Us Together gets involved is, we're the ones picking them up at the airport. Like literally, we're going to John Glenn International Airport, picking them up. We're getting them sorted out. There's kids in school, enrolling them in school. And then just meeting all those basic necessities you need when you first arrive to a new place. It only lasts, the program that they're involved in, it's through the Department of State. It's called the Reception and Placement Program. It's only 3 months of assistance where we're able to like find them housing and things. Obviously, that's not enough time for someone to be like, great, I'm all good, I don't need help anymore. That doesn't exist. So that's when services like Hannah's programs come in, where we can offer a lot of continued support for our families, whether that's like medical case management or more access to education, whatever. We try to be very flexible in what we do, just so we can best serve the needs of what the populations we're currently, working with can be met. So, yeah. In a nutshell. Yeah, there's lots of barriers they all face.
Yep.
So, yeah.